Chapter 11. Broken. Dr. Mosley, Mary Ann, and Jackson headed down a weakly illuminated hallway. The culprit, a bulb that flickered intermittently in the north corridor. Dr. Mosley stopped one custodian and pointed toward the bulb. The young man smiled and gave Dr. Mosley a thumbs up. Tiny chill bumps formed on Mary Ann's arm. She rubbed her hands over her arms to keep warm. Jackson removed his blazer and placed it over her shoulders. She placed her hands in the arms of his blazer and pulled it tight. Jackson then rubbed his hands rapidly over her arms to provide warmth, and Mary Ann rewarded him with a brief smile. As they walked through the hospital, Mary Ann saw a mother being pushed in a wheelchair holding a newborn. She wondered if she had just given birth. It activated a memory of a previous encounter she had while in a similar hospital. She tried her best to avoid hospitals. Jackson took the girls to their appointments, unless it was necessary that she attend. She hoped the patients were getting the proper care, including their daughter Maura. The hospital medicine, combined with the unappetizing aroma of their cafeteria food, produced a nauseating smell. Dr. Mosley stopped when he reached a rather sizable room with a rectangular window in the door. Mary Ann looked through the glass and caught a glimpse of Maura sleeping. She was embarrassed because it was her actions that put them in this awful predicament. "She's sound asleep, but you can wait until she wakes up," Dr. Mosley advised. Mary Ann grabbed Dr. Mosley's hand out of nervousness. Being a father himself, he understood her concern. He held her hand briefly, and after a few seconds, patted her with his other hand before he released it. He reached over and tapped Jackson on the shoulder. "As I was looking over the paperwork, I realized I needed a couple more pieces of information from you, Dr. Manning." Jackson held up his index finger, motioning for Dr. Mosley to give him a moment. He turned toward Mary Ann. "I'll be back in a few minutes," he replied. He kissed her on the cheek and headed down the hallway with Dr. Mosley. Mary Ann placed her hand on the doorknob and pushed on the lever until it clicked open. She slowly opened the creaking door. As soon as she could squeeze through the opening, she stepped in the room. She tiptoed in the dark toward the bed and immediately noticed the heavy bandages on her arms and legs. Mary Ann slid the rocking chair from the corner of the room to the left side of Maura's bed. She reached over and caressed Maura's hand. After a few soft strokes, Maura made a few faint moaning noises. Her small fingers gripped the covers. She kicked her legs and wiggled her feet.
"Leave me alone. I don't want to go with you,"
Maura whispered.
"It's okay, Maura. I'm here."
Mary Ann grabbed a few tissues from the table next to Maura's bed and dabbed the sweat that was forming above her daughter's brow. Maura's eyelids lifted. She rubbed her eyes, and Mary Ann's face incrementally came into view. Maura looked down at her hands and noticed the bandages. Her heartbeat quickened. Her breaths were fast and shallow. The beads of sweat on her forehead traveled down her mocha cheeks. A shaken Maura sat up and touched her arms and legs.
"What happened? Where am I?"
she questioned. Mary Ann placed her right hand against Maura's left cheek and looked deep in her eyes.
"Take slow, deep breaths,"
Mary Ann instructed. Maura followed her mother's suggestion. As she calmed down, her memories returned. After a few deep breaths, she turned her entire body toward the wall away from her mother.
"Why didn't you believe me?"
Maura asked. Trickles of tears fell from Maura's eyes and onto her white, fluffy pillow. Mary Ann walked to the other side of the bed, wanting to talk to her daughter face to face, but every time she tried, Maura turned her body in the opposite direction.
"Maura, I want to believe you, but—"
Maura interrupted her mother.
"This is all your fault. If you would have allowed me one day to be beautiful, then the reflection girl wouldn't have harmed me,"
Maura scolded.
"You're right, and if I could take it back, I would,"
replied Mary Ann.
"Why didn't you come and help me?"
Maura asked.
"Maura, when I heard you scream, I came as fast as I could. I attempted to open the door, but it was stuck,"
Mary Ann pleaded.
"Just leave me alone,"
Maura demanded. There was nothing Mary Ann could say to appease her daughter. Maura snatched one of the pillows from off her bed and threw it at her mother.
Get out!
She yelled. A small, petite nurse by the name of Betty Harper heard the commotion as she walked by Maura's room. The intense verbal exchange between Maura and her mother prompted her to investigate. She peeked her head inside the room and kindly motioned for Marianne to join her in the hallway. Marianne hurried toward the nurse, curious to see if she had some new information regarding Maura.
I hate to intrude in family matters, but might I suggest something?
Nurse Harper asked, in the politest tone she could muster. Under different circumstances, Marianne would have told the nurse to mind her own business, but because she was so polite and had a warm smile on her face, she decided to hear her out.
Sure, go ahead,
Marianne responded.
Give your daughter a little time to herself. I'm sure she'll come around.
Marianne knew the nurse was right, but there was nothing she hated more than disrespectful children and someone who probably had no kids giving her parenting advice. She swallowed her pride for the sake of Maura's well-being and kindly placed her hand on the nurse's shoulder.
Thank you. I'll give her some time,
responded Marianne. Nurse Harper smiled and squeezed Marianne's hand as she made her way into Maura's room. She picked up the pillow and placed Maura's delicate head behind it. She handed her a bottled water along with a few pain pills. Marianne watched Maura and the nurse's interaction through the rectangular glass window and wondered how a complete stranger could have more of a profound effect on her daughter than she could. She replayed the fiasco in her mind and contemplated how she would have handled things differently. The muscle tension she experienced in her arms and knots she felt in her stomach showed that her guilt was now manifesting into physical conditions. She regretted how she handled the situation. Her daughter was experiencing severe pain, and it was her fault. An unshakable shadow of sadness haunted her as she continued to blame herself for her daughter's injuries. A reassuring hand touched her shoulder, and she knew by the firm yet gentle grip who it was. His touch was like a superpower that could alter her disposition at once. She rested her small, delicate fingers on his big, hairy, masculine hands. He placed his other hand on her shoulder and gave her a mini massage. They both peered into the room at their daughter and wondered how they had gotten themselves into this awful predicament.
I thought you were finishing the paperwork,
Marianne replied. All finished. How'd it go in there? Jackson asked.
I upset her,
Marianne chimed. She's upset with us both, but in time this will pass. Jackson grabbed Marianne's hand. He intended to lead her into Maura's hospital room, but she did not follow.
I think it's best that I stay out here. Maura doesn't want me in there,
she replied. Sure she does, Jackson added.
She yelled at me and told me to get out,
Marianne replied. I'll talk to her. Jackson turned and headed into Maura's hospital room, but stopped when he felt Marianne's gentle touch on his shoulder.
There's something you should know.
Marianne's grave expression gave Jackson cause for concern. She pulled Jackson by the hand away from the door and nervously fidgeted with the buttons on Jackson's blazer that she was still wearing. She pushed a few wet strands of her hair behind her ears while her downcast eyes stared at the floor. What is it, Marianne? Jackson asked, concerned. Marianne turned to him and blurted out the words as fast as she could.
Maura let me fall down the steps.
She what? Jackson asked. Marianne let out a long sigh and talked in a faint whisper.
After I told her she could not leave the house dressed inappropriately to meet with some boy, Rain mentioned that I was too hard on her. I took several moments and reflected on the situation and realized that I may have been a little too harsh. So I went upstairs to apologize, and when I reached the top of the steps, Maura was standing there blocking me from reaching the top. I tried to go around her, but she continued to block me. I gripped her arm to move her out of the way, and she snatched her arm from my grasp, which caused me to tumble down the steps. That's how I got the cut on my head and this bruise on my leg.
Marianne lifted up her leg for Jackson to see. Jackson kneeled down on one knee and examined it. It looks worse than it is. Does it hurt? He asked.
Not as much as it did earlier. I can walk without limping,
she replied. I'll have the nurse get you an ice pack.
Thank you, Jackson,
Mary Ann responded. I did not know you were having such severe behavioral problems with Maura, he added.
We've had some altercations, but nothing of this magnitude.
Jackson placed his hand on his head and loosened his tie. This is a lot to process, Jackson replied.
There's more.
More? I don't know if I can handle more. Mary Ann remained silent and waited for Jackson's approval to continue. Go ahead, he instructed. Mary Ann lowered her voice to a whisper and stepped in a little closer toward him.
Do you remember the hush ghost that Maura claimed haunted her dreams and visited her in her room?
Mary Ann asked. I remember. We got up at least one night a week dealing with her and that reoccurring problem, replied Jackson.
Well, Maura claims the same hush ghost is now trying to pull her in the mirror,
Mary Ann stated. A ghost? Pulling her in a mirror? Jackson questioned.
Yes, she's calling it the reflection girl now.
Mary Ann, our daughter has a mild case of schizophrenia. When she doesn't take her medication, she might hallucinate.
But she takes her pill every morning. I blend them in her smoothie,
Mary Ann countered. Even if she takes her medication, there is a possibility she might experience some side effects. Aggression and hallucinations are rare, but they happen, Jackson added.
But Jackson, have you seen her wounds? That's what's making me wonder if there's some truth to this.
Some truth about a reflection girl dragging her into a mirror? Mary Ann, Maura is in denial about her condition. Hell, we haven't told Rain because she doesn't want her sister to look at her differently. We may have to consider that she's harming herself. Mary Ann absorbed the sting of Jackson's words. The thought of her daughter injuring herself was too much to consider. Jackson inched closer toward Mary Ann to comfort her, but she held up her hand and signaled for him to stop.
I just need a moment to myself,
Mary Ann replied. Jackson honored her request. He turned and walked into Maura's hospital room. He wanted to examine her for himself.